You think you know who you're looking at. Think again. In 2024, on a flight from JFK to London, a wealthy heiress named Victoria St. James made the biggest mistake of her life. She saw a black man sitting in seat 1A and assumed he was stealing a spot he couldn't afford. She mocked him, humiliated him, and screamed for security to drag him off the plane. She thought she had all the power, but when the captain finally stepped out of the cockpit, he didn't arrest the man. He saluted him. Stay tuned to hear the true story of how one woman's prejudice cost her everything, and the shocking identity of the passenger she tried to destroy. The air inside the cabin of Flight 402, bound for London Heathrow from New York's JFK, was already stale, despite the premium scent of bergamot that Global Airways pumped into their first-class cabin. It was a humid Tuesday in July, the kind of day where the heat radiated off the tarmac in shimmering waves, making everyone irritable before they even boarded. Victoria St. James adjusted her oversized Dior sunglasses, though she was already indoors. She didn't need them for the sun. She needed them to establish a barrier between herself and the commoners. At 52, Victoria was a woman who wore her wealth like a suit of armor. Her platinum blonde bob was razor sharp, her tweed Chanel jacket was vintage and priceless, and her patience was non-existent. She was the widow of a real estate tycoon, a woman whose name was plastered on a library wing in Connecticut, and she had never heard the word no without immediately speaking to a manager. She tapped her foot impatiently on the jet bridge floor, clutching her crocodile skin Birkin bag as if it contained nuclear codes. "Excuse me," she snapped at the gate agent, a weary-looking woman named Sarah. "Why is the line not moving? I paid $12,000 for a ticket, not for a standing-room-only experience in a sauna." "We are just finishing pre-boarding for military personnel and passengers needing assistance, Miss St. James," Sarah said, her smile tight and practiced. "We will begin first-class boarding in exactly 1 minute." Victoria huffed, rolling her eyes so hard she saw the inside of her eyelids. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. When the call finally came, Victoria elbowed past a young couple to be the first one down the pristine hallway of the jet bridge. She needed to be seated first. She needed her pre-flight champagne. She needed the world to acknowledge her arrival. She swept onto the plane, ignoring the flight attendant's greeting, and turned left into the sanctuary of the first-class cabin. It was an ultra-exclusive configuration. Only 8 suites, each with a closing door, lie-flat bed, and massive entertainment screen. It was her kingdom, or it should have been. Victoria stopped dead in her tracks. Her seat was 1K on the right side of the aisle. But her eyes were drawn immediately to seat 1A, directly across from hers. Sitting there was a man. He was an African-American man, perhaps in his late 40s or early 50s. He was dressed simply, a charcoal grey hoodie, dark denim jeans, and pristine white sneakers. He had a pair of noise-cancelling headphones around his neck and was quietly reading a thick paperback book with a cracked spine. He looked comfortable, relaxed, and in Victoria's mind, he looked entirely wrong. Her brain did a quick, prejudiced calculation. Hoodie, jeans, sneakers, black. In her world, this equation did not equal first-class international. In her world, this equaled staff, upgrader, or criminal. She marched over to her seat, tossed her bag down with a heavy thud, and remained standing. She stared at him. He didn't look up. He turned a page of his book, his demeanor serene. "Ahem," Victoria cleared her throat loudly. The man didn't move. "Excuse me," she said, louder this time, her voice cutting through the soft jazz music playing over the cabin speakers. The man blinked, marking his page with a finger, and looked up. His eyes were calm, dark, and intelligent. He slid his headphones off his neck and placed them on the side table. "Yes, ma'am. Can I help you with something?" His voice was deep, articulate, and polite, but Victoria didn't hear politeness. She heard audacity. "You are in the wrong seat," she stated flatly, pointing a manicured finger at the economy section behind them. "The back of the plane is that way." The man looked at his ticket, then back at her. A small, confused smile played on his lips. "I believe I'm in the correct seat, ma'am. 1A. "Don't play games with me," Victoria hissed, leaning in, her perfume, something heavy and floral, wafting over him. "I know how this works. You saw an empty seat and thought you could sneak in here before the real passenger arrived. Well, I am here now, and I am watching you. Get up." The man's smile faded slightly, replaced by a look of weary patience. "Ma'am, I have a ticket for this seat. I'm not sneaking anywhere." "Let me see it," she demanded, holding out her hand. "I don't think I need to show you my ticket," the man said softly. "I've already shown it to the gate agent and the flight crew." "Because it's fake!" Victoria's voice rose to a shrill pitch, attracting the attention of the other first-class passengers who were now filing in. A tech CEO in 2A and a famous fashion model in 2K were both watching with wide eyes. "You clearly used points, or you're an employee using a buddy pass. And let me tell you, buddy pass riders are the first to be kicked off when paying customers have an issue. And I have an issue." The man closed his book. He took a deep breath. "I suggest you sit down, ma'am. The flight attendants are trying to serve beverages." "Don't you tell me what to do!" Victoria shrieked. "I paid full fare. Do you know who I am? I am Victoria St. James. My husband built half the skyline in Chicago. I will not sit across from a hoodlum in a sweatshirt who thinks he owns the place." Sarah, the flight attendant from the gate, hurried over, a bottle of Dom Perignon in her hand. She looked panic-stricken. "Miss St. James, is there a problem?" "Yes, there is a problem, Sarah." Victoria pointed a trembling finger at the man in 1A. "This man is in the wrong seat. He is aggressive, he is rude, and he refuses to show me his ticket. I want him removed, now." Sarah looked at the man in 1A. She froze for a split second, her eyes widening slightly, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps fear, crossing her face. She looked back at Victoria. "Miss St. James," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Please take your seat. This gentleman is listed on the manifest. He is in the correct seat." "Check again!" Victoria slammed her hand on the suite wall. "Look at him. Look at what he's wearing. Does he look like he paid $12,000? He's probably a drug dealer or a rapper spending dirty money, and I won't feel safe sleeping next to him." The cabin went deadly silent. The racism wasn't just an undercurrent anymore. It was a tidal wave. The man in 1A didn't yell. He didn't stand up. He simply looked at Sarah and said, "Sarah, isn't it? Could you please get me a sparkling water with a lime? And perhaps a towel for the lady? She seems to be overheating." Victoria gasped. "You arrogant—" "Sarah, get the head purser. Get the captain. I want this man off this plane immediately. I am a Diamond Medallion member. I demand you check his credentials." Sarah looked torn. She glanced at the man who gave her a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. It was a nod of permission. "I will get the lead flight attendant," Sarah stammered. "Please, Miss St. James, sit down." Victoria didn't sit. She stood over the man, her shadow looming over him. "You picked the wrong woman to mess with," she sneered. "I'm going to have you in handcuffs before the wheels even leave the ground." The man reopened his book. "We'll see," he said. The tension in the first-class cabin was so thick, it felt like the air pressure had dropped. The other passengers were frantically texting on their phones, likely broadcasting the drama to friends or social media, but nobody dared to intervene. Victoria St. James was a force of nature, a destructive, loud hurricane of entitlement, and no one wanted to be in her path. Minutes later, the lead flight attendant, a stern British woman named Eleanor, arrived. She had dealt with drunk celebrities, vomiting children, and medical emergencies, but nothing irked her more than entitlement. "What seems to be the issue here?" Eleanor asked, her posture rigid.
"Line."
"The issue?" Victoria spat, finally taking a step back, but keeping her glare fixed on the man in 1A. is that Global Airways has lowered its standards to the point of negligence. I am telling you, this man is a security threat." "A security threat?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. She looked at the man. He was currently cleaning his glasses with a microfiber cloth. "In what way, Miss St. James?" "He is belligerent," Victoria lied effortlessly. "He threatened me. He told me to watch my back when I asked him nicely to check his seat assignment." The man in 1A sighed. It was a heavy, deep sound. "I said nothing of the sort." "Liar!" Victoria screamed. "See, he's calling me a liar. I want his bag searched. I bet he has a weapon. Look at that hoodie. You can hide anything in there. Gun, knife, drugs. I refuse to fly until he is vetted by security." Eleanor looked at the man in 1A. "Sir, did you threaten this passenger?" "No, Eleanor," the man replied calmly. He used her name, though she hadn't introduced herself yet. It was on her badge, sure, but he said it with familiarity. "I simply asked her to let the crew do their jobs. I have been sitting here reading The Count of Monte Cristo." "He knows your name," Victoria pointed accusingly. "He's stalking the crew. This is terrifying. I'm shaking. Look at me. I'm shaking." She was indeed shaking, but it was from rage, not fear. "Miss St. James," Eleanor said, her patience fraying, "I cannot remove a passenger based on your speculation. He has a valid boarding pass. He has cleared TSA. Unless he commits a specific act of violence or non-compliance, he stays." Victoria's face turned a shade of crimson that clashed with her Chanel jacket. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, the latest iPhone Pro Max in a gold case. "Fine," she hissed. "If you won't do your job, I'll call someone who will. My brother-in-law is the district director for the TSA in New York. I have the CEO of this airline, Mr. Jonathan Global, on speed dial. Well, my husband did. And I have the number. I am going to make a call, and when I'm done, you will be fired, Sarah will be fired, and this thug will be in prison." She began tapping furiously on her phone. The man in 1A finally turned his body fully toward her. For the first time, his expression hardened. The softness in his eyes evaporated, replaced by a steely, command presence. "Ma'am," he said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming authoritative, "I strongly suggest you do not make that call. You are digging a hole you won't be able to climb out of. Sit down, drink your champagne, and let us fly." "Are you threatening me again?" Victoria laughed, a manic, high-pitched sound. "Oh, you are scared now. You know I have connections. You know you're a fraud." She put the phone to her ear. "Yes? Get me Director Reynolds. Now. It's Victoria St. James. It's an emergency at Gate 42. I have a security breach on the aircraft." She paused, listening, then glared at the man. "Yes, a suspicious male. He's urban, aggressive, refusing crew instructions. I think he's intoxicated. I want Port Authority here, now." She hung up and crossed her arms, a smug smile plastering her face. "They're coming. Police, Port Authority. You're done." Eleanor, the lead flight attendant, looked horrified. She leaned toward the man in 1A. "Sir, I am so sorry. I can call the captain." "No," the man said, raising a hand. "Let her play this out. If she wants the police, let the police come. But Eleanor—" "Yes, sir? Tell Captain Reynolds not to take off. We're going to be delayed. And tell him Eagle 1 is having a situation in the cabin." Eleanor's eyes went wide as saucers. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Eagle 1? Sir, are you—" "Just tell him," the man said quietly. Victoria missed this exchange. She was too busy texting her friends, boasting about how she was taking out the trash in first class. She felt powerful. She felt righteous. 10 minutes passed. The plane should have pushed back. The pilot announced a delay due to a passenger issue. A groan went through the economy cabin, but inside first class the silence was heavy. Then the thumping of heavy boots on the jet bridge echoed. Victoria beamed. Finally! 3 Port Authority police officers boarded the plane. They were large, imposing men with tactical vests and grim expressions. "Who called it in?" the lead officer asked, scanning the cabin. "I did," Victoria waved her hand like she was hailing a cab. "Over here, officer. Thank God you're here. That man," she pointed a long acrylic fingernail at seat 1A, "is a danger to this flight. He threatened me. He's likely armed, and he has no business being here. Remove him." The officers looked at Victoria, then at the man in 1A. The man remained seated, his hands resting calmly on his knees. He didn't look like a threat. He looked like a man waiting for a bus. The lead officer, a sergeant named Miller, stepped forward. He looked annoyed. "Ma'am, did you see a weapon?" Well, no, but look at him," Victoria stammered. "He's wearing a hoodie. He fits the description." "What description?" Miller asked dryly. Of a troublemaker," Victoria yelled. "Just get his ID, run his name. You'll see he has a record. I know it." Miller sighed. He turned to the man in 1A. "Sir, I'm sorry about this. Do you have identification?" "I do," the man said. He reached slowly into his back pocket. "Watch out! He's reaching!" Victoria shrieked, diving behind her seat. The officers didn't flinch. They watched as the man pulled out a slim, leather wallet. He didn't pull out a driver's license. He pulled out a black badge in a leather case and a heavy metallic ID card with a gold chip. He handed it to Sergeant Miller. Miller took the ID. He looked at it. He squinted. Then his eyes widened. He looked at the man, then back at the ID. He stiffened, his posture instantly correcting from annoyed cop to respectful subordinate. "Oh," Miller said. "Oh, wow, I didn't realize." "Is he a felon?" Victoria popped her head up, gleeful. "Is he wanted?" Miller ignored her. He handed the ID back to the man with two hands, almost reverently. "My apologies, sir. We didn't know you were on board. Is this passenger bothering you?" Victoria's jaw dropped. "Excuse me? Bothering him? I am the victim here. Why aren't you arresting him?" "Ma'am," Miller turned to her, his voice hard. "You need to be quiet. You have just made a false police report." "False report?" Victoria screeched. "Who is he? Who is this man? Why are you protecting him?" "I'm not protecting him because I want to, ma'am," Miller said. "I'm protecting him because I have to, and frankly, you are the one causing the disturbance." "I demand to speak to the captain," Victoria yelled, losing all composure. "Get the pilot out here. I am not flying with this criminal and these corrupt cops. I want the pilot." The cockpit door buzzed. It clicked open. "You won't need to shout," a voice boomed. Captain Tom Reynolds, a veteran pilot with 4 stripes on his shoulders and silver hair, stepped out of the cockpit. He looked furious, but he wasn't looking at the man in 1A. He was glaring directly at Victoria St. James. "I heard the commotion," the captain said, "and I heard the code Eagle 1. He walked past Victoria, ignoring her completely, and stopped in front of seat 1A. The captain of the aircraft, the ultimate authority on the plane, stood tall. And then, to Victoria's absolute shock, Captain Reynolds snapped his heels together and delivered a crisp, sharp salute to the man in the hoodie. "Admiral," the captain said, "welcome aboard, sir. We are honored to have you." Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. "Admiral?" The word hung in the air like a suspended guillotine blade. "Admiral." Victoria St. James blinked rapidly, her brain attempting to reboot. The syntax of the situation refused to compute. Admirals wore pristine white uniforms with gold braid and medals. Admirals were stiff, older men with grey crew cuts who stood on battleships. Admirals were not black men in hoodies reading paperbacks in seat 1A. "Admiral?" Victoria let out a short, incredulous laugh. It sounded like a bark. "Is this a joke? Is this some sort of reality TV prank? Where are the cameras?" She spun around, scanning the cabin ceiling for hidden lenses. "You cannot be serious. Look at him. He's wearing sneakers." Captain Reynolds did not look at the ceiling. He did not look at the police officers. His eyes were locked on Victoria with a terrifying intensity. He slowly lowered his salute, but his posture remained rigid. "I assure you, Miss St. James, this is not a joke," Captain Reynolds said, his voice clipped and cold. The man you have been harassing for the last 20 minutes is Admiral David Sterling. Until 3 months ago, he was the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He is one of the most decorated officers in the United States Navy, and currently he is the highest-ranking civilian advisor to the Department of Defense. The cabin was silent enough to hear a pin drop. The tech CEO in seat 2A actually gasped audibly. Victoria felt a prickly heat crawl up her neck. Her narrative, the one where she was the victim and the man in the hoodie was the villain, was disintegrating. But Victoria St. James did not back down. She doubled down. That was her superpower and her fatal flaw. "I don't care if he's the King of England," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "He is dressed like a hoodlum. He was rude to me. And frankly, Captain, I don't believe you. You're covering for him. Maybe he's your friend. Maybe you're drinking buddies. But I paid for this seat. And I have rights. I don't feel safe flying with a man who hides his identity." Sergeant Miller, the police officer who had been holding the ID, stepped forward. He looked at Victoria with open disdain now. "Ma'am, the ID is real. It's a diplomatic, government-issued credential. It clears him for top-level security access. If he wanted to, he could probably commandeer this plane, let alone sit in it." "Then why is he dressed like that?" Victoria pointed an accusatory finger at the Admiral's chest. "If you're so important, why do you look like them?" The racism was no longer veiled. It was naked and ugly. Admiral Sterling finally spoke. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't stand up to intimidate her physically. He simply took off his glasses and looked her in the eye. "I am dressed like this, Miss St. James," the Admiral said, his voice rolling through the cabin like low thunder, "because I have spent the last 6 months in a suit, sitting in situation rooms, making decisions that keep people like you safe while you sleep in your silk sheets. Today is the first day off I have had in 2 years. I am flying to London to visit my daughter and meet my new grandson. I dressed for comfort because I didn't think I needed to impress anyone in a metal tube at 30,000 feet. He paused, letting the words sink in. "I didn't realize," he continued, a sharp edge entering his tone, "that I needed to wear my dress blues to be treated with basic human dignity." "Well, you should have," Victoria snapped, though her confidence was wavering. She looked around the cabin for support. "You all agree with me, don't you? It's misleading. It's entrapment. He wanted me to yell at him so he could pull this power trip." No one agreed with her. The fashion model in 2K was filming the entire interaction on her phone. The tech CEO was shaking his head in disgust. Even the flight attendants, usually trained to be neutral, were looking at Victoria with expressions of pure revulsion. "Miss St. James," Captain Reynolds said, stepping closer to her, "you have delayed this flight by 30 minutes. You have verbally abused a fellow passenger. You have wasted the time of the Port Authority police, and you have insulted a man who has served this country with more honor than you will ever understand." "Don't you lecture me," Victoria hissed. "I am a shareholder. I know Jonathan Global. I will have your wings stripped." "You can try," Reynolds said calmly. "But right now you have a choice. You can sit down, be silent, and not speak another word to Admiral Sterling or my crew for the duration of this flight, or you can take your bags and get off my plane." Victoria's mouth fell open. You can't kick me off. I'm first class." "I am the captain," Reynolds said, "and on this aircraft, I am the law. You are disrupting the safety and order of the flight. Make your choice. Now." Victoria looked at the police. Sergeant Miller had his hand resting on his handcuffs, almost hoping she would choose violence. She looked at the Admiral, who had already gone back to reading his book, dismissing her entirely. The humiliation was burning her inside out. To be scolded like a child, by a pilot, in front of a black man she had tried to get arrested, it was intolerable. But the thought of being dragged off the plane in handcuffs, and the inevitable viral video, was worse. She snatched her purse from the floor. "Fine," she spat. "I will stay. But mark my words, this isn't over. My lawyers will be waiting at Heathrow. You will all be sorry." She threw herself into a seat, 1K, and aggressively slammed the suite door shut. The captain nodded to the police. "Thank you, Sergeant. We can handle it from here." "Copy that, Captain," Miller said. He looked at the Admiral. "Thank you for your service, Admiral. Sorry for the trouble." "Not your fault, son," Sterling said without looking up. "Safe shift." The police left. The captain returned to the cockpit. The engines whined to life. For the first 4 hours of the flight, the cabin was tense. Victoria sat in her suite, stewing in a toxic brew of rage and embarrassment. She drank 4 glasses of wine in rapid succession. She typed furiously on her laptop, drafting emails to the airline, to the FAA, to her lawyers, to news outlets. She was constructing a version of events where she was the hero, a vigilant citizen spotting a threat, only to be bullied by a woke airline crew. She thought she had won a small victory by staying on the plane. She thought the worst was over. She had no idea that Admiral David Sterling wasn't just a military man. She had no idea that her connection to him went far deeper than a coincidental seating arrangement. She had no idea that the hard karma wasn't just about embarrassment. It was about to be financial annihilation. Dinner service had concluded. The cabin lights were dimmed to a soft blue hue. Most passengers in first class had reclined their seats into beds to sleep for the remaining 3 hours to London. Victoria, however, was wide awake. The alcohol had made her bold again. The humiliation had faded into a dull resentment. She needed to reassert her dominance. She couldn't let him have the last word. She slid her suite door open. Across the aisle, Admiral Sterling was awake. He was no longer reading. He had a laptop open on his tray table, a rugged, military-grade machine that looked thick and secure. He was typing slowly, reviewing a document. Victoria leaned across the aisle. "Enjoying your little power trip?" she whispered loudly. The Admiral didn't look up. "Miss St. James, go to sleep." "Don't tell me what to do," she hissed. "You might have fooled that captain with your little badge, but I know who you are. You're a diversity hire. You probably sat behind a desk pushing papers while real men fought. And now you think you can intimidate me? I'm Victoria St. James. My name means something." Admiral Sterling stopped typing. He closed the laptop slowly. He turned his head and looked at her. The cabin was dark, illuminated only by the soft glow of the reading lights. In the shadows, his face was unreadable, but his eyes were sharp. "St. James," he repeated the name thoughtfully. "Yes, I know the name well. Your husband was Richard St. James, correct?" Victoria puffed up her chest. "That's right. A titan of industry. A man who actually built things. He founded St. James Holdings. We supply housing and infrastructure for military bases all over the world. We are essential." "Richard was a decent man," the Admiral said unexpectedly. "I met him in 2010 in Kabul. He was overseeing the construction of a new barracks. He got his boots dirty. He shook hands with the privates. He cared about the quality of the concrete because he knew it had to stop mortar rounds." Victoria was taken aback. You knew Richard?" "I did," Sterling said. "But Richard has been dead for 5 years. And since then, St. James Holdings has been run by the board. And by you." "I am the majority shareholder," Victoria said proudly. "I make the decisions." "I know," Sterling said, "and that is why the quality has dropped." "Excuse me?" Victoria gasped. "The concrete is thinner," Sterling said, counting off on his fingers. "The wiring in the new housing units in Germany is substandard. The plumbing contracts in Okinawa were over budget by 40% and 3 months late. St. James Holdings used to be the gold standard. Now, it's a liability." "How dare you?" Victoria raised her voice, forgetting the sleeping passengers. "You don't know anything about my business. We are posting record profits." "You are posting profits because you're cutting corners," Sterling said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You are squeezing every cent out of the contracts to fund your lifestyle, to buy $12,000 tickets and Hermes bags, while the soldiers living in your buildings deal with mold and power outages." "That is a lie," Victoria argued, though a flicker of fear ignited in her stomach. How did he know about the mold complaints? "That was internal data. It's not a lie. It's in the report," Sterling said, Enbart, tapping his rugged laptop. "What report?" The Admiral turned his body fully toward her. "Victoria, do you know why I am flying to London? It's not just to see my grandson. I have a meeting tomorrow morning at the US Embassy with the Ministry of Defense and the NATO Appropriations Committee." Victoria went cold. So, Sterling continued, "the primary agenda item for that meeting is the renewal of the Global Infrastructure Contract, the contract that constitutes about 80% of St. James Holdings' revenue, the contract that is up for renewal this week." Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs. She knew this. Of course she knew this. Her financial advisors had been telling her for months that this contract was the lifeline of her company. If they lost it, the stock would crash. She would be ruined. They are going to renew it," Victoria stammered. "We have the legacy status. They always renew." "They were going to," Sterling said, "until I was appointed chairman of the Oversight Board last month." The silence that followed was louder than the jet engines. Victoria stared at him, her eyes wide with horror. You're the chairman?" "I am the man who signs the bottom line," Sterling said calmly. "I am the man who decides if your company gets another $5 billion of taxpayer money, or if we give the contract to a competitor who actually cares about the safety of our troops." Victoria felt like she was falling. The plane was steady, but her world was plummeting. I didn't know," she whispered. Her arrogance was evaporating, replaced by a desperate, clawing panic. "Admiral? Surely personal feelings won't get in the way of business. My company is the best equipped." "Character matters, Mrs. St. James," Sterling cut her off. "Leadership matters. You are the face of your company, and for the last 3 hours I have watched you abuse staff, waste police resources, and display a level of bigotry and entitlement that turns my stomach. If this is how you treat people in public, I can only imagine how you treat your employees, your tenants, and your obligations." He leaned in closer. "I was on the fence about the renewal," he admitted. "I was reading the file when you boarded. I was looking for a reason to trust St. James Holdings again, for Richard's sake. I was looking for a sign that the company still had integrity." He gestured to her, her angry face, her clutching hands, the aura of malice she projected. "And then you sat down," he said. "You judged me by the color of my skin and the clothes on my back. You tried to have me arrested to soothe your own ego. You showed me exactly who you are." Victoria was trembling. This wasn't just social embarrassment anymore. This was a death sentence for her fortune. "Admiral," she choked out, her voice trembling. "Please. I was stressed. I didn't mean it. Let's start over. Let me buy you a drink. Let's talk about this." The Admiral picked up his headphones. "The time for talking is over, Victoria," he said. "I have made my decision. I'll see you in bankruptcy court." He placed the noise-cancelling headphones over his ears, effectively silencing her existence. Victoria sat frozen in her suite. The luxury leather seat suddenly felt like an electric chair. She looked at the champagne glass on her table, the symbol of her status, and realized it was about to be the last expensive thing she ever touched. But the flight wasn't over, and the universe wasn't done with Victoria St. James yet. Because while the Admiral had sealed her financial fate, the internet was about to seal her social fate. The Atlantic Ocean was dark and endless beneath them, a void of black water mirroring the black hole expanding in Victoria St. James's stomach. For the last 2 hours of the flight, the first-class cabin had settled into a deceptive quiet. The lights were low. The hum of the engines was hypnotic. Most passengers were asleep under their duvets. But the silence was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating calm before a detonation. Victoria had not slept. She sat upright in her suite, staring blankly at the flight map on her screen. The little airplane icon was inching closer to Ireland. Her mind was racing, replaying the Admiral's words over and over again. "I'll see you in bankruptcy court." She tried to convince herself he was bluffing. Surely a government contract couldn't be cancelled just because of a personal disagreement on a plane. Surely her lawyers, the best money could buy, would find a loophole. She grabbed her phone. She needed to draft an email to her chief legal officer, prepping him for a battle. She connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi. It cost $30, a fee she usually expensed without a thought. The connection took a moment to stabilize. The moment her phone synced with the satellite network, it began to vibrate. It wasn't a gentle buzz. It was a continuous, violent spasm. Buzz, 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 buzz. Notifications cascaded down her screen like a waterfall of digital hate. Asterisk Twitter. You have 14,000 new mentions. Asterisk Instagram. You have 5,000 new comments. Asterisk WhatsApp. 42 unread messages from Board of Directors, PR team, and mother. Asterisk CNBC News. Alert. St. James Holdings stock plummets in after-hours trading. Victoria's hands shook so badly she almost dropped the device. She clicked on the first notification, a Twitter link sent to her by her own frantic publicist. It was a video. The thumbnail showed her face, contorted in rage, finger-pointed, veins bulging in her neck. The title was simple, brutal, and catchy. Racist heiress tries to kick Admiral off plane, instantly regrets it. Victoria pressed play. The video had been filmed by Chloe, the fashion model in seat 2K. The angle was perfect. It captured everything. "He is aggressive, he is rude, and he refuses to show me his ticket." Victoria's voice in the video was shrill and grating. Then the camera panned to the calm, dignified Admiral Sterling reading his book. Then the confrontation with the police. Then the captain's salute. "Admiral, welcome aboard, sir." The video didn't stop there. It had been edited with captions. It identified her by name, Victoria St. James, CEO of St. James Holdings. It identified the Admiral. It even had a "wasted" graphic when the captain shut her down. Victoria looked at the view count, 4.2 million views, and it had only been uploaded 3 hours ago. She scrolled down to the comments. They were a bloodbath. Asterisk user 88. Imagine having that much money and zero class. Hash boycotts James, asterisk veterans for justice. This woman makes millions off military housing contracts, and she treats a vet like that? Cancel the contract now. Asterisk stock watcher. Shorting $SJH immediately. This is a PR disaster. Asterisk Sarah, _G. I used to live in one of her buildings. The mold was awful. She's a slumlord in Chanel. Victoria felt bile rise in her throat. The hard karma wasn't just coming. It had already arrived while she was trapped at 38,000 feet. She looked across the aisle. Admiral Sterling was still awake. He wasn't on his phone. He was working on his laptop, reviewing PDFs of blueprints, likely finding the flaws in her company's work. Suddenly a soft ding echoed through the cabin. Liam, the tech CEO in seat 2A, stood up to stretch. He caught Victoria's eye. He didn't look away. He held up his phone, showing her the trending page of Twitter. #St. James is over was the #1 trend in the United States and #3 in the UK. Liam mouthed one word to her. Wow. It wasn't a wow of admiration. It was the wow one utters when watching a car crash in slow motion. Victoria scrambled to open her email. The first message was from her chief financial officer. The subject line was simply, "Urgent. Stock crash." Victoria, I don't know what happened on that flight, but the video is everywhere. The Asian markets just opened, and St. James Holdings is down 18%. The board is calling an emergency meeting. They are talking about a vote of no confidence. You need to land and call in immediately. We are bleeding out. Victoria couldn't breathe. The cabin felt like a coffin. She stood up, needing to pace, needing to scream, needing to fix it. "Sit down, Miss St. James," a voice cut through the recycled air. It was Eleanor, the lead flight attendant. She was standing at the galley entrance, her arms crossed. Her face was no longer polite. It was stony. I need to make a call," Victoria gasped. "It's an emergency. My business—" "The seatbelt sign is on for turbulence," Eleanor said, though the plane was perfectly steady. "And the captain has instructed that you are to remain seated for the remainder of the flight. We are beginning our initial descent into London." "You don't understand," Victoria pleaded, tears finally streaming down her face. Tears of self-pity, not remorse. "They are destroying me. The internet, they are ruining my life." "You ruined your own life, ma'am," Eleanor said, loud enough for the Admiral to hear. "We just served the drinks." Admiral Sterling turned his head. He looked at Victoria, sobbing in her $12,000 seat. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He looked at her with a profound, crushing indifference. "Admiral," Victoria whispered, her voice cracking. "Please, you can stop this. Make a statement. Tell them we made up. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. If you tweet something, they'll listen. Please, I'll do anything." The Admiral took off his reading glasses. He looked at the frantic woman who had called him a hoodlum and a criminal hours before. "I don't have a Twitter account, Miss St. James," he said simply. "I prefer to do my talking in person, and I believe the world has already heard everything they need to hear from you." He turned back to his window, watching the sunrise over the clouds. The light was golden and beautiful. For him, it was a new day. For Victoria, it was the twilight of her empire. The descent into London Heathrow is usually a dreary affair of grey clouds and industrial sprawl, but today the sky was clear. Flight 402 banked sharply over the Thames, lining up for runway 27R. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere had shifted from tension to anticipation. The other passengers were packing their bags, chatting quietly. They knew they had been part of something viral. They were witnesses to history. Victoria St. James sat paralyzed. She hadn't packed her bag. Her expensive lotions and iPad were still scattered on the table. She was staring at her phone, watching the stock ticker for St. James Holdings, SJH, tick down, down, down. SJH, $42.50, minus 22%. Every percentage point was millions of dollars of her net worth vanishing. "Cabin crew, take your seats for landing," Captain Reynolds announced. The wheels touched the tarmac with a firm thud. The reverse thrusters roared, slowing the massive beast. As the plane taxied toward Terminal 3, Victoria hoped for a quiet exit. Maybe she could slip out a side door. Maybe she could wear her sunglasses and hide. But as the plane pulled into the gate, she saw through the window that privacy was not an option. There were 3 police cars on the tarmac, not airport security, London Metropolitan Police. And behind the glass walls of the terminal, she could see a mob, cameras, flashing lights, reporters. "Oh God," she whispered. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Usually Victoria would have pushed her way to the front. Today she couldn't move. Admiral Sterling stood up. He put on his charcoal hoodie, grabbed his backpack, and adjusted his glasses. He looked exactly as he had when he boarded, unassuming, calm and grounded. He looked at Captain Reynolds, who had opened the cockpit door. "Thank you for the ride, Captain," Sterling said, shaking his hand. "An honor, Admiral," Reynolds replied. "We have a car waiting for you on the tarmac. Bypass the terminal. VIP protocol." "Appreciate it," Sterling said. He walked past Victoria's seat. He stopped for a fraction of a second. "Good luck with the board meeting," he said. He walked out the door, into the jet bridge, and disappeared down the stairs to the waiting black SUV. He was gone, clean and professional. Victoria was left alone with the wreckage. "Miss St. James," Eleanor said, standing over her, "it's time to deplane." Victoria gathered her things with trembling hands. She put on her sunglasses, pulling her coat tight around her. She walked to the door. Stepping into the jet bridge felt like walking onto a stage she hadn't rehearsed for. She walked up the ramp, dread pooling in her shoes. As she emerged into the terminal arrival area, the flashbulbs blinded her. "Miss St. James! Miss St. James! Is it true you called a decorated admiral a drug dealer? Miss St. James, the Prime Minister has just condemned your comments. Do you have a response? Are you resigning as CEO?" A wall of reporters pushed against the railing. Victoria put her head down, shoving through the crowd. "No comment. Get away from me." But waiting at the end of the corridor wasn't her driver. It was 2 officers from the Metropolitan Police and a man in a sharp grey suit holding a briefcase. The man in the suit stepped forward. Victoria recognized him. It was Mr. Henderson, the head of the UK division of St. James Holdings. "Henderson!" Victoria cried out, relieved. "Thank God! Get me out of here, these people are animals!" Henderson didn't move to help her with her bags. He stood stiffly, his face pale. "Miss St. James," Henderson said, his voice straining to be heard over the paparazzi, "I am not here to drive you." "Then why are you here?" she snapped. Henderson handed her a thick envelope. "I have been instructed by the board of directors to serve you with this immediately. It is a notice of suspension, effective pending an investigation." Victoria froze. The cameras clicked furiously, capturing the exact moment her career ended. "Suspension?" she shrieked. "I own the company." "Not anymore," Henderson said quietly. "The morals clause in your contract. It's ironclad. The stock has dropped 30% in 4 hours, Victoria. The investors are pulling out. The military contract renewal was just formally denied by the US Department of Defense 10 minutes ago. We lost the infrastructure bid." Victoria felt the world spin. "Denied? Already?" "Admiral Sterling works fast," Henderson said grimly. "He sent the memo from the air." Victoria looked at the police officers. "And them? Why are they here?" One of the officers stepped forward. "Miss Victoria St. James? We have received a complaint regarding a disturbance of the peace on a flight arriving in UK airspace and hate speech allegations under the Public Order Act. We'd like you to accompany us to the station for a statement." "Arrested?" she gasped. "For shouting?" "For racially aggravated harassment, ma'am," the officer corrected. "Please come this way." The flashes exploded again. Click, click, click. The image of Victoria St. James, dishevelled, clutching a suspension letter, being escorted away by British police while her own employee turned his back on her, would be on the cover of every tabloid by morning. As she was led away, she looked back at the window. On the tarmac below, she saw a black SUV pulling away, driving smoothly towards the VIP exit. Inside was the man in the hoodie. He was going to see his grandson. He was going to have tea. He was going to sleep soundly. Victoria was going to a holding cell, and the story wasn't over yet. The trial of public opinion was just beginning, and the verdict was already in. 6 months had passed since Flight 402 touched down at Heathrow. The world moves fast. Viral videos usually fade into the digital abyss within a week, replaced by the next scandal or cat video. But the fall of Victoria St. James was not a fleeting moment. It was a slow, agonizing demolition, broadcast in real time. It started in the holding cell at Heathrow Airport. Victoria spent 12 hours there, stripped of her phone, her dignity, and her delusion that money could fix everything. When she was finally released on bail, she emerged into a world that had fundamentally shifted. St. James Holdings, the empire her husband built from the ground up, was in freefall. The stock price had plummeted 60% in 3 days. The board of directors, usually a group of yes-men who feared her wrath, voted unanimously to remove her as CEO within 48 hours of the incident. They cited the morals clause in her contract, a clause she had ironically insisted on strengthening years ago to police her employees' behavior. But the real blow came from the Pentagon. Admiral David Sterling, true to his word, had submitted a formal report to the Oversight Committee before he even left the airport. The report didn't focus on his personal feelings. It focused on the facts. It detailed the substandard materials, the ignored safety complaints, and the toxic leadership culture that Victoria embodied. The government contract was cancelled. A competitor, Vanguard Infrastructure, was awarded the bid the following week. Victoria sued, of course. She spent millions on high-powered lawyers, claiming wrongful termination, defamation, and emotional distress. But the video was damning. The testimony from the flight crew was airtight, and the public sentiment was a tsunami she couldn't swim against. She lost the lawsuit. She lost the appeals. She lost the company. Now, 6 months later, Victoria St. James sat in a small, rented apartment in a quiet suburb of London. Her Kensington townhouse had been seized by creditors. Her Hamptons estate was on the market to cover legal fees. Her friends, the socialites, the gala attendees, the people who drank her champagne, had vanished like smoke. She sat at a small kitchen table, staring at a laptop screen. She wasn't checking stock prices anymore. She was looking at a live stream. It was a dedication ceremony for a new military housing project in Germany, the very project her company was supposed to build. On the screen, a man in a sharp navy suit stood at a podium. It was Admiral David Stirling. He looked older, tired perhaps, but his eyes were bright. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't gloating. He was smiling. "We are here today," Stirling said into the microphone, his voice steady. "Not just to open a building, but to restore a promise. A promise that the men and women who serve our country deserve a home that is safe, dignified, and built with integrity." The camera panned to the crowd. Soldiers and their families were cheering. Children were running around a new playground, a playground that St. James Holdings had cut from the budget to save money. Victoria felt a lump in her throat. For the first time in her life, it wasn't anger. It was shame. Stirling continued, "I want to introduce you to the lead architect of this project, a young woman who took over the plans and ensured that every brick was laid right. Please welcome Miss Maya Stirling." A young black woman stepped up to the podium. She was maybe 30 years old, poised and brilliant. She shook the Admiral's hand, her father's hand. Victoria froze. Maya Stirling. She remembered the name. Years ago, a young architecture student named Maya Stirling had applied for an internship at St. James Holdings. Victoria had seen the resume. She had seen the name, and she had personally rejected it, tossing it in the trash with a comment about not needing charity cases. She hadn't known Maya was the Admiral's daughter. She hadn't known Maya was top of her class at MIT. She had just seen a name and made a judgment. Now, that charity case was rebuilding the empire Victoria had destroyed. On the screen, Maya spoke. "Thank you, Dad, and thank you to everyone here. We built this not for profit, but for people, because character is what endures when the concrete crumbles." Victoria closed the laptop. The silence in her small apartment was deafening. There was no magical redemption for Victoria. She didn't get her company back. She didn't become a better person overnight. But sitting there in the quiet, stripping away the layers of entitlement and rage, she finally understood the cost of her prejudice. She had lost everything, not because of a woke mob or a vindictive admiral. She had lost it because she underestimated the quiet power of dignity. She had looked at a man in a hoodie and saw nothing when she should have seen everything. She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, it was raining, a grey, steady London drizzle. She watched people walking by, strangers, diverse, busy, living their lives. For the first time in her life, Victoria St. James didn't feel above them. She was just one of them, and that, perhaps, was the hardest justice of all. And that is the story of how Victoria St. James lost an empire in a single flight. It's a harsh reminder that character isn't defined by the price of your ticket or the brand of your clothes. It's defined by how you treat the people around you, especially when you think you have the power. Admiral Stirling didn't need to shout to win. He just needed to be himself. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. What would you have done if you were in the Admiral's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.